boundaries. And actually, you are my sunshine, kind of like a lot like that, because the second verse, you know, the other night, dear, as I lay dreaming, I dreamt I held you in my arms. Well, if you take that in the sense that we're all, or while I lay sleeping, we're all sleeping, and we're all dreaming, right? That's why I thought that's kind of like me. And really, from some points of view, that's the root of confusion, right? Because when we grow up in this world, and we learn things from our parents and our teachers and various other cultural institutions like television or whatever, we form a conception of ourselves and a view of the world that when it comes time to really be ourselves and participate in the divine process, we have to shatter those early conceptions. You know, we grow up fitting into other people's worlds and defining ourselves according to them. Okay, this is not really my idea. This is like what Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in terms of making agreements. You know, that when you grow up, in order to survive as a young soul in the universe, you make agreements, and you define. Even, you know, the child in their consciousness at birth doesn't differentiate between outside and inside. It recognizes that everything that exists is a hologram. Everything that exists is a mental projection, and can't determine what's outside of the body and what's inside of the body. Right? It does that through interacting with the environment and getting information of the environment and learning this is out there. You know, these other things are in here, and in order for me to survive in this world, I have to relate to the out there, right? Mommy's out there, food is out there, you know, and also all of this positive and negative reinforcement that comes in at first, you know, associated with words, but, you know, through physical contact of various different kinds, right? You do this, you know, you get a hug and a smile. You do this, you get a frown or a harsh word, or in some environments, you know, a spanking or something. And then from that, you know, you go in and people are socialized earlier and earlier now, like through daycare and training and something like that, being taught how to believe and being given information on who they are, whether they're good or bad, whether or not they can do certain things, you know, and we grow up with that. And so people have a conception, you know, a definition of their self a lot of times, that because language is social, and so once they begin to think about it, you know, that's defined in agreement with other people, right? Then in your teenage years, you begin to individuate. You begin to break away from the psychic womb of your parents. It's like your second birth is leaving the home and beginning to develop and define your own universe based on your own experience, and facing those two questions of that stage of growth, the identity crisis of who am I and what is really going on in the world and how do I fit into it, right? And even there, to a large degree, then, you know, you're just learning from the greater psychic womb of the culture that you're in, you know, because you have to figure out, you know, who you are in relationship to that culture, so that you can make a living, right? And define your life course. So then you're going, and your university professors or the foreman or the boss on your job, you know, is going and telling you what it is that you need to do and how you need to learn, and you continue to grow through that process, right? But it's all a relatively arbitrary. It's not. Well, it's all a relatively, you know, set kind of thing that is not necessarily what reality is. It's just how we think of reality, right? And we know, like, that when Thomas Kuhn talks about paradigm shifts, you know, basic shifts in the way that we perceive reality, you know, two different cultures or two different time periods can view reality very differently. And when they're in there and everybody's comfortable with it, it all seems this is reality, right? But when we talk about the continued development, because for me, reality is divine process. The universe as we know it, on any level, is divine process, spirit unfolding. So, in relationship to Confucianism, there are times on an individual level, on a social level, or on a worldwide level, where in order to go to a higher level of understanding, in order for spirit to develop more, the old wineskins need to be broken down and new wineskin in order for new wine to flow into it. Right? That's where the process of confusion comes in. And the last time I talked about, pro and con, and how the world, because they were all following the analytical, sort of dialectical approach, analyzing and breaking down reality into small parts, became ever more divided. And so eventually they had to come to Kant and say, confuse us, right? And so then Kant developed the process of confusion. And the important thing to remember is confusion is not a state of mind. Confusion is a process where you are moving towards fusion, right? Moving towards oneness. Having lost oneness, we need to move back towards oneness. So I'm just going to read a short little thing that I wrote in response to somebody on MySpace, because my motto on MySpace is, I accept what is, I embrace all being as myself. And I said, well, there's a little story behind the formulation of that phrase, because they liked the phrase. And so I wrote, they said, well, what is it? I would like to hear it. And so I wrote down this little thing here that I'm going to share with you, and it's partly because it's 15 minutes. I'm supposed to try to keep you right. So there really is, well, I'll just read this, and then I'll try to make it brief, but I was going through some life changes and stressful times. I lived in Maryland. My mom in California got cancer, and I went out to see her. She was going to have to go through chemo and radiation. I went back to Maryland for a week or two to take care of some things. I used to go at night to the Double T Diner to read, think about things, and write. The night before I flew back out to California, I wrote in my journal, I accept what is. I also wrote down something like, all people must die. Therefore, fear no earthly power. Love other people, seek the truth, be honest and sincere, and always do your best to do the right thing. The next day, September 11th, 2001, I flew out of Baltimore in the morning to fly to San Francisco. After a little breakfast, I went into a kind of meditation, and I dwelt for a while on the I accept what is. I thought of what Jesus had said about love God with all your heart and love other people as yourself. In my mind, loving God with all your heart resonated with accepting what is, because I had begun to think of God as absolute reality, embracing all that is. I didn't want to limit my love to just loving other people. I wanted it to embrace animals, plants, even inanimate things, reaching out to the entire cosmos, both internal and external. So my mantra became, I accept what is, I embrace and love all being as myself. I was overwhelmed by a deep and loving feeling. It was at about that time that the captain came on the loudspeaker and announced that we had to land in Lincoln, Nebraska, because there had been a terrorist attack and all air traffic was being grounded. Naturally, I had to ask myself if embracing all reality and love as myself meant the terrorists too. My mind responded, yes. It actually responded, of course. And there were a lot of tears for the suffering of the world. So that was the story that I embraced, of how that motto came about. But I thought it was relevant both because it's 9/11 and because of the different things. But just